Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And our guest today is an industry professional. I think that's probably the best way to describe him. And I'll let him introduce himself like I do a lot of the guests. And guest, could you please say your name and spell it? And tell us what you do.
Dave Prentiss. My last name is spelled Prentiss. I'm the president and CEO of the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra.
Okay. How long have you been doing that now?
I've been in the CEO position since '08, so about 12 years.
Wow, that's a long time. What from when you took over until now, what are the differences, if you can articulate that for us?
Sure. Let's see. So as I mentioned, I took over as CEO in '08. I was actually on the board as a volunteer for several years before that, actually going back to 1996. So I've been involved with the symphony one way or the other for over 2 decades. So the changes that I kind of view the symphony as just continuing to evolve and develop. We did our first strategic plan back in 1996, and we made a lot of improvements starting back then. So since '08, we've done 2 more strategic plans, and we've just finished our 3rd strategic plan. And the things that we've focused on are expanding our education programs in the community. That's been a core focus of us over these years. And then also increasing the quality of the orchestra and the guest artists and the number of concerts that we can provide. So those, I would say, are the 2 main things. And then along with that, just trying to deepen our engagement in the community, in the neighborhoods of New Bedford, and building partnerships with other organizations, both art organizations and social service organizations, to really have a deeper impact on the community.
Do you play an instrument? Do you have a musical background?
I guess you could say I sort of do, in that I, ever since 4th grade, elementary school, growing up in Salem, Massachusetts, I've played instruments. I never got that good though, so I never pursued it academically or professionally. So I just consider myself an amateur musician.
So there was always an affection for it more than a profession.
Sure, and what happened eventually is from playing it, I would say probably in college, near the end of high school and the beginning of college, I really fell in love with classical music, listening to it. And so I became a regular concert goer and listener of classical music. I also listen to lots of other types of music too. I love lots of different types of music. But since late high school, early college is when I really fell in love with classical music.
What was it that kicked you over, so to speak?
Well, that's an interesting question. The memory I have, one is Bach harpsichord concertos. For some reason, maybe I was at the public library back in Salem during high school, and I was just thumbing through the records, and I saw some Bach harpsichord concertos, and I said, I'll see what this sounds like. And just out of curiosity, I took it home and listened, and that's when I really started to just listen to it over and over again. And then in college, you remember those record clubs that you could sign up for, and you would
Capitol
get
Record, yes, yeah. For a penny, right?
Yeah, right. You would get 10 for free and then no obligation to buy any more. So
Yeah.
I milked that system as much as I could. And I remember getting, Beethoven piano concertos, Beethoven violin concerto. And then it just went from there. It's sort of like an evolution, just discovering new composers. And even just this past month, I've discovered some composers that are new to me. So it's kind of a never-ending process. It's a journey that you can just enjoy your whole life.
Did you ever get the Bach bug?
I don't think I got that one. No.
Back in the 70s, between mid 70s, mid 80s, there were two gentlemen, organists that tried to and was successful in popularizing Bach, especially with youth.
Right.
Howard
Was
Biggs.
was that switched on Bach or so? Who did that? Somebody. Yeah.
That may have been Virgil Fox.
Right.
Because there was E. Power Biggs and Virgil Fox, and to this day, Fugue and Toccata in D minor by Bach, played by Virgil Fox, who was like really trying to make classical music cool, which it always has been. It's just for some reason there are cultural things that we try to overcomplicate. Wine, classical music, and a few other things.
I agree with you 100%. In fact, when you look at the history of classical music, you see that early on it wasn't this necessarily highfalutin, hoity-toity thing. It was, some of the people like Paganini, Franz Liszt, they were the rock stars of their time, and people would scream and yell when they saw them, and when they performed, they would start clapping and call for encores, and the change really developed a little bit in the 19th century, but then in the early 20th century, especially in the United States, there was this idea, well, we should make classical music more serious, more, almost elevated into some type of sacred religious experience. And that, of course, was done by just a small segment of the classical music lovers, and it kind of took over. And to me, that was like one of the worst things that ever happened to classical music. It lost its spontaneity and its energy, at least in sort of the formal way we think about it. But of course, it always has that energy and that creativity if you just take it at face value, which is what we try to do at the symphony. We just try to present this as great music that anybody who likes music can enjoy. And just like you can enjoy other types of music, you can come to really love and enjoy classical music.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they turn the symphony halls into churches, cathedrals of music, very stiff, very proper. You had to get all dressed up, be on your best behavior. Whereas, as you said, back in the day of Paganini and Chopin, and I mean, women would swoon, because of their favorite artists. So really, people really haven't changed all that much, but the culture probably has more so. I interviewed your conductor, Yaniv Deneur, just recently, and what a delight. I think I found a friend because we just started shooting things back and forth. And how long has he been now associated with the NBSO?
This is just the end of his third year with us. So he came to us in 2017. We had done a year-long national and actually an international search. We got applications for the position from all over. And we brought in 4 finalists to conduct the orchestra, to spend a week here in New Bedford. And he came out as the clear favorite, both with the musicians, with our audience, with educators, with board members. And he has actually surpassed the high expectations we had, because his work with the orchestra is just masterful. He really brings out the absolute best in our musicians. And he really connects with the audience, which maybe is something that you experienced when you interviewed him. He
Yes.
has such a great personality, has a great sense of humor, doesn't take himself too seriously, and he really knows how to enjoy making music and being with people. So from the stage, our audience just loves him, and so that old idea of sort of the rock star of classical music, I think he's building that here in New Bedford, and it's really wonderful to see.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening, breathtaking. All of those things to see how open-minded he was about things. And then, as I described to him, I mean, I had a brief dalliance with classical music, specifically the opera. I was a set designer for Boris Goldovsky of the Metropolitan Opera, and really, they're artists like any other artists. They have their quirks, their varied personalities, but what their mission is in life is to just pursue this incredible passion that they have for the music. And I think that seems to come out. How is it that a community such as New Bedford can have such a great orchestra?
Well, I like the way you framed that question, so thank you for presenting it that way. And I kind of feel the same way too. That when you think about a city our size, with sort of the economic base that we have, I would say that we probably have one of the finest, if not the finest, orchestra of any city our size in the United States. And I think the reason we do, there's obviously a lot of different factors that go into that, but one is the strategic planning that we've done, going all the way back to the 90s. We've been very intentional and deliberate in how we've tried to grow. Second, we have just an incredibly dedicated and generous board of trustees, and our council of advisors are just really kind of the core of the vision of what we're trying to do. And then not only their generosity, but the generosity throughout the community, through New Bedford and through the surrounding towns of New Bedford, really have given us the financial resources to gradually build things up. Just for an example, back in 1996, when we did that first strategic plan, our annual budget was about $50,000 a year. And now we're at about 1.4 million, which is, much more growth than just inflation. Inflation is only a very small part of that. And so we've been able to expand our concerts, really develop extensive education programs in New Bedford schools and the schools of surrounding communities. And because of that foundation, we are then able to attract incredibly talented musicians and guest artists and conductors and music directors like Yaniv. And so we've built something that people want to be involved with, the musicians and music director, conductors. So for example, when we did our search, we had hundreds of applicants from all around the country and from Europe who wanted to conduct the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra. And so I think that was a testament to what we've been able to build here.
What is there a relationship, or do you have relationships with, I'm thinking of, I guess you would call them feeder institutions for the NBSO, the local high school music programs, Dartmouth, New Bedford, Fairhaven, the greater New Bedford high schools, UMass and their music department. And because we have, well, at one point had, I don't know what the status is now, but well, let's put it this way, we have this incredible relationship with the Berklee School of Music. How do any of these factors, if at all, play into the development and the continuation of the NBSO?
Sure. So we have really strong relationships with the public schools and the music programs. We have a youth orchestra program that meets every week at UMass Dartmouth, and those students are from elementary school all the way through high school and college. And so typically, the path of a musician who wants to become a professional musician is from high school, they go to college and they study. They might go to Berklee, they might go to the New England Conservatory or any other school like that. And then after they graduate, sometimes they'll continue to get a master's degree in performance or a PhD, and then they start taking auditions. And so we run auditions every year, and so the musicians come in and we evaluate them, and we offer them positions in the orchestra. So that's kind of the process that they have to go through. And I'll say that we're kind of in a golden age of talent. The music schools, the conservatories do such an incredible job of preparing these students. And our orchestra is relatively young. You know, the vast majority of our musicians are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And you know, whenever anybody talks about, oh, is classical music dying out or anything like that, I say, just look at the schools. Look at these young adults who are just so passionate that all they want to do is devote their life to playing this music. And I think that tells you all you need to know about the future of classical music. So yeah, we take advantage of all the educational institutions in this area and in the greater Boston area, because just by that location, we have a huge advantage in attracting the very best musical talent for the orchestra.
How has the cool factor played into this? What I mean by that, and I'm struggling to remember, there's like the four tenors, you know, for the opera, and they have the 2 or 3 women who are violin virtuosos. I mean, phenomenal electricity on the stage, and then it's something as off the charts as Apocalypta, who does heavy metal using classical instruments. I mean, how much of that has played into this, maybe not resurgence, but maybe and we can't even say a newfound appreciation, because you have a generation that's coming up who doesn't know anything about the previous generation. They're just like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that. How has any of that played into this?
The issue that you're getting at with this question really is fascinating and fairly complex and important, because going back to what we said earlier about the past kind of perspective of classical music as being something religious or sacred, you know, our culture went along with that for a while. And so if you go back to the 50s and the 60s, it was pretty regular that some classical music musician or conductor would be on the cover of Time magazine, or, you know, would have national social and cultural attention. That doesn't really happen too much anymore. We've lost our privileged standing in the culture, and maybe that's a good thing. But it means, what do we do instead of that? We don't have the advantage of sort of being this preferred option. And so now you could say we have to earn it. And so I'm all for that. And some of the ways that's showing is by the things that you've just described. Younger musicians who say, hey, I just can't take for granted that if I play, people are going to want to hear me. I have to meet them. I have to make a case. And so it's created this incredible creativity and innovation. And there's, you know, for example, up in Boston, there's a great group called A Far Cry. All younger musicians, no conductor. They set their own programs, and they have so much energy and so much talent that they just blow people away. And there are groups like that all around the country now. And many of our musicians in New Bedford participate in those type of groups. And so I think it's a great, healthy step for classical music to say, we have to compete in the cultural marketplace on equal terms with everybody else, and we have to earn our place. Because then, you know, people are really listening to you because they want to, because they're enjoying it, because they're falling in love with that music. And that's really the ultimate goal of what we do.
A couple of things that you said. First of all, you're one of the only people that I know that tapped into something that I've bookmarked in my brain, is the fact that, for example, like back in the 50s and 60s, Life magazine, Look magazine, Saturday Evening Post, Newsweek, you know, Today, not Today, it doesn't matter, but the more popular magazines, the periodicals of the day, it wasn't unusual to see Leonard Bernstein or to see Jack the Dripper, Jackson Pollock, and some of the power elite of the abstract expressionists on the covers, as well as the fashion designers. It seems like the whole aspect of culture in this country has sort of gone from the front page, its front page status, to buried somewhere in the back of wherever, because the magazines don't exist either,
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. This kind of, I mean, there's complex social and cultural forces at play here, and I'm no expert on that by any means, but there has sort of been a continual uh, democratization of culture, and so it's a way, it's a level playing field, and if anything, sort of the more popular forms, things like rock music, pop music, because of their immediate appeal and the money that they can therefore generate, they ultimately are the ones that get the most attention now. Uh, but I'm okay with that, because I think that what we have to do is just have to work hard to show people what we have to offer, and we might not have something that everybody wants, but I think we have something that a lot of people will really enjoy and appreciate in their lives if they just are exposed to it. And so that's why our education programs are so important in the schools. And that's why doing outreach concerts in the community, doing the live streams that we've been doing during the pandemic are really critical, so that new people can just see what classical music is like and decide for themselves if it's something that they want to get into, which of course we hope they do, and a lot ultimately do.
yeah, that's what Yaniv and I discuss, was just the aspect of exposure. I mean, my exposure came from a Philco radio. I can still smell it, the tubes burning when my granduncle would listen to the Metropolitan Opera. I think it was on Sundays, or could have been Saturday night. It was a long time ago. But to hear the voice of the Metropolitan Opera, Boris Goldovsky, and then to have, the opportunity to work for him and tell him that.
Yeah.
But it's just something that just, and I also said to Yaniv that I read something that you can put a child in a room that is, all four walls are like loaded with bookshelves, loaded with books. And that child never, ever has to open up one book, but that child will grow up to be a reader. Isn't that weird?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so much, kids are sponges, and my mom actually tells a story of when I was just a toddler. She would put me in the living room with a bunch of my toys, and she had the stereo console, and she was collecting records from the grocery store. They had a classical music series that you could pick up every week from the grocery store, and she would put them on, and I would just listen to that music while I was playing, not really paying attention to it, but I was absorbing it. And if you study how the brain processes music, it's fascinating, because the brain has to take some time to be able to process new forms of music. But the more you listen to one type of music, the more comfortable your brain gets with it, and it starts to really appreciate what's going on. And so classical music, in a way, has to be sort of gradually introduced, almost in the background, I think, sometimes with younger people, and then without even realizing it, they start to like it. And again, this is all kind of based on the neuroscience of how the human brain works, and this applies, of course, to all music. Whether you develop a real love for, say, bluegrass music, or for folk music, or jazz, all of that, it takes a while for the brain to get wrapped around what the music is doing. But once it understands it, not unconsciously, this isn't really a conscious thing, but once kind of unconsciously your brain gets what's going on, that's when you really fall in love with any particular type of music.
I'm almost wondering if that's why, for example, the music that our parents listened to, that when we were conscious of it, like, oh God, they're listening to that again, and it's like you didn't want to listen to it, and as you got older, and unfortunately sometimes as they passed away, you're listening to that music specifically.
Right.
It's a weird connection. I mean, to me, my dad was eclectic in his musical tastes, and Gene Autry with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
still a favorite of mine, to this day. Another question, you talked about the structure of musicians, how they go from school, they're structured. They go from school, and then they enter into the symphonic music field, through college and other aspects. That is a complete opposite, or in contrast, shows the void for artists, unless I'm totally missing something. I'm a painter. I went to school. You either you either were encouraged or discouraged to continue, and then you got into high school. You either encouraged or discouraged. Art lessons, if you were lucky, they weren't that available as music lessons are. So we don't have an art or a visual education system apart from the school system or supporting the school system. And then you get to college, and you really begin your first practical, professional kind of training, which is kind of late when you stop and think about it. And then you go into your master's program, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to teach, and teaching is what's going to support you. But that's it. There's no structure. And I'm just thinking, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if the musicians could lead the way for the artists, the visual artists, and say, okay, this is how it's done. We don't have this structure.
Yeah, yeah, there's a parallel, I think, on the training side of it, education-wise. But then, as far as how do you produce your product, how do you deliver it? That's a whole different animal. Because obviously, with music, it's within the structure of, say, an orchestra or a chamber group, and with a visual artist, of course, you're producing a work of art that you then put out there, through an exhibit, gallery, etc. And so it really is a different animal once you pass the kind of the formal education stage of things.
You also mentioned something that was rather interesting about the specter of the church. A lot of symphonic, what is the correct term? Classical, it's like with art. If you say contemporary, people right away assume it's modern. But then again, modern is a wiggly term as well, because modern means now. It doesn't mean whether it's abstract or it's objective, subjective, right. Objective. Right. So what is the correct term for the music that your orchestra produces?
Yeah, well, the whole terminology issue is something we could talk about for a long time and have some agreements, and people have some disagreements. For me, it's just, define how you are using the term. So when I say classical music, I'm using that in sort of a generic sense, where we're talking about the tradition of music that developed out of Europe, going back, into the late Renaissance. And there are different periods within that musical tradition. One of the earliest is called the Baroque period, people like Johann Sebastian Bach. And then there was a classical period. So when you use the term classical as a classical period, now it's more of a specific term, and that's Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven. And then there's the Romantic period, which is people like Brahms and Dvorak and Wagner. And then we get into contemporary music, which now is over 100 years old. Stravinsky and others. So the terminology thing can really be just a rabbit hole that you can go down and never come back from. But I just use classical music as a generic term. You can also say symphonic music. So the type of music that's written for a symphony orchestra, you could call symphonic music. Of course, when you push it a little any further, then you're going to start to have to make exceptions and qualifications and all of that stuff. But for our purposes, I just like calling it classical music or symphonic music.
Right, and there's orchestral. Let's not forget that.
That's right. So, we can fill in orchestral music too.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I was speaking with Yaniv. This concept that it's all about math, and whether it's visual art or it's music, it's about math. And if you imagine a coin being math, And on one side, art is math seen, because it's about proportions and perspectives and, you know, and weights and measures and all kinds of mathematical things. And the same thing happens with, on the music side, it's music, it's art, it's math heard. What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, well, mathematics is really a pretty extraordinary thing if you stop to think about it. And so yeah, the mathematical aspect of music, of course, is on the harmonic side because of the frequency of different notes and overtones. And so there's a mathematical structure that you can use to explain what happens, you know, when we make music and when we hear music. And then of course on the rhythm side, how many beats per measure, how fast you're playing, slowing down, speeding up, the subdivision of different notes, that is all put into mathematical terms. And so that explains why I read this article where some mathematical, like an international mathematical prize, almost every winner is also a musician, like an amateur musician, because the way the brain works, if your brain is good at math, it'll probably have an affinity for music. Or if you are really good at music, you probably have an affinity for math. So that's, you know, like at one level that's fascinating and it's the underlying structure of things. But from the standpoint of enjoying the music, you don't need to add or subtract or multiply to love the music you're listening to. But if you like to kind of get into that aspect of it, by all means, go ahead. But for the real pure enjoyment of the music, all you need to do is listen to it, and that's all it takes.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously you could egghead the life out of anything, whether it's art or music. And well, we'll go back to wine. You know, it's fermented grape juice. Enjoy it.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
you can get into the chemical. You can look at it from the standpoint of chemical analysis, or you can just drink it and enjoy it.
Exactly. Was it Dave Barry? One of his columns is from, oh my God, 20-something years ago. Overtones of burnt toast. What does that mean? Since the NBSO, the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra, is from the Whaling City, and that's a moniker that we don't hear used all that often anymore. I just realized as it came out of my mouth. Has there been any programming to assert that, or to echo off of that? You know, with Moby Dick. I mean, there's been several manifestations of Moby Dick, and I mean, Moby Dick is on. Oh, Moby is on Broadway. I think it's still running. I forgot his name. Scottish Irish last name. But anyway, what any relationship still of the orchestra to that theme of our heyday?
Right. Over the years, we've done many things with that heritage and connection. Because we're the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra, we feel like we should be a reflection of the community and really be engaged with the community's history and also its future, of course. And so we've done several things. The score for the famous Moby Dick movie with Gregory Peck, we've performed that over the years. It's a beautiful suite that was written for the movie. We've done commissions. We've commissioned a work with respect to Frederick Douglass and his journey to New Bedford. We commissioned a work called Sea Portraits by the composer Stephen Paulus that reflected different aspects of the sea and the connection of a community to the sea. So periodically we delve into that, and I'm sure we will in the future too. Actually, next season, we're planning to do a concert that focuses on New Bedford's Portuguese heritage. There are some fabulous Portuguese classical music composers. Obviously the ones you think about most often tend to be German, like Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms, but all countries had rich, and still do have rich classical traditions.
So The future. That was another thing. It's kind of interesting how we're syncing. To me it's interesting anyway because but the future of the NBSO, the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra. It's a Barbara Walters thing. If you could look into the crystal ball, what do you see? You know, and it can be a little foggy, a little hazy. It doesn't have to be crystal
Right.
clear.
Right. Well, of course, right now with the pandemic, things are pretty foggy. We've announced our season for September, but we've communicated with our patrons. Of course, we don't know what we'll be able to do, but we will keep them posted every step of the way. And if we have to make modifications to the season, we will, obviously based completely on musician and patron and staff safety. So we're working closely with the Zeiterion Theater on those issues. The season, we hope, in some form can take place because it's incredible what we're offering the community this year. We have Pinchas Zukerman, one of the greatest violinists alive today, coming into New Bedford to perform with the orchestra. And we have other soloists, and Yaniv is going to be both conducting and playing from the piano for one concert. So the season is really spectacular, and so we're excited about that. We also have some uncertainty, of course, about our education programs. We're working closely with New Bedford Public Schools and other school districts to see how things develop, because obviously we want to stay very engaged with the kids in those schools. So we will find a way. I can tell you that much. I don't know exactly what the way will be, but we will be in the schools working with students and teachers in the months ahead. As far as further on the road, well, as I mentioned earlier, Yaniv is finishing up his third year with us, which is the end of his first contract. And several months ago, we were very pleased to announce that we've extended his contract for 4 more years. So we're looking to a really bright future with him leading the orchestra and continuing to program really interesting and innovative concerts for our patrons. Continuing to work with our musicians and guest artists and to really offer just fantastic concert experiences, both in the Zeiterion and around the community. We've performed at Kilburn Mill, we perform in playgrounds and in downtown locations. So we want to really be in all different places as much as we can to reach as many people as possible.
Yeah,
I would say, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You would say?
I was just going to make one last point, which
Sure.
is another big part of our vision for the future based on the strategic plan that we just completed, is to really connect more strongly with the neighborhoods of New Bedford, the families in the neighborhoods of New Bedford, both through their school, but also through parks and playgrounds and other locations, other social agencies. We really want to have a strong relationship with the families, show them what our music has to offer, the fun that can be involved in it, the enjoyment, and to really give them a chance to make it a part of their lives. So I would say that is probably the strongest focus we have for our future.
Yaniv was really pleased by the Kilburn Mill location. He wants to do it again. I mean, he was really, really pumped up. I put the bean in his ear, so to speak. I went to school, graduate school, with a gentleman who happened to be one of the coordinators, according to him, for the first live performance as written of the 1812 overture with canon. And when I told him that, Yaniv's eyes like blew up. It's like, that would be so much fun. Yeah, I mean, it really, that's what it comes down to. It, you were talking about the stiffness and the properness and all those other things. It's just fun music. I mean, opera especially started in the streets. It was the people's music. It was about their lives, their wretchedness, and so on and so forth. And it just unfortunately became what it evolved to, something that most people think, oh, I don't know anything about that.
Right. Yeah. In a way, it's almost, you could argue that classical music at some point kind of got hijacked by the elites or by critics who just wanted to turn it into this big highfalutin thing. When the reality is, like all music, classical music comes from inside the composer. It comes from inside the human heart, and it expresses emotions and feelings and hope and joy and sorrow, and just like a great pop song, rock song, country song, it can touch all of those emotions. And you just have to open yourself to it. You have to give your brain a chance to get comfortable with it, and that takes a little time. But once you do, it just can really enrich your life so much. And I referenced earlier the live streams that our musicians are doing during the pandemic. If you go to the New Bedford Symphony Facebook page, you can see all the videos of the past ones that we've done, and the schedule for the ones we're doing in the future. And there you really see the creativity and the personality of our musicians making music in their living rooms and just sharing it with everybody. And you can see in the comments that people make during the performance how it's really touching them and really bringing something important and fun into their lives. And so that's the way we look at it. That's how we see our job. It's just to play this great music and let people enjoy it.
Would it be safe to say that the pandemic has made the orchestra, well, and then a lot of us, I mean, we're going to find all this out after, 'cause I'm referring to BP before pandemic and AP after pandemic, because that's really the brackets that are going to be superimposed on our lives. Has the pandemic, and I think you've already kind of answered that, made not just the NBSO, but all of its, membership, its orchestra, its conductor stronger in ways that were totally unimagined before?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would say there's kind of two aspects to it. One is, at least in the case of the New Bedford Symphony, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of things that were on our to-do list. So if you look at our strategic plan that we just completed, we had live streams, we had more online presence, both for concerts and for education. But of course, as you know, when you have this list, this strategic to-do list, it's a question of priorities and capacity and when can we get to this? And the pandemic has, in a way, forced us, but also given us this opportunity to really accelerate some of these things that we've wanted to do anyways. And so that has definitely been one of the effects. I think with reference to the other thing you mentioned, mm-hmm. with us and with all other orchestras and other arts groups, the pandemic has forced us to rethink, who we are and what we do. And because this situation is a bit disorienting, in a way that kind of shakes you loose, and it lets you get down to the roots of things, and it gives you an opportunity to really say, okay, what is the reason that we exist? What is the really important things that we can do for people, that we can do for our community? And so you see some real innovation and creativity developing, not just with us, but with other organizations, with other artists. And so I think that will be a good thing for us going into the future. Beyond the pandemic, a lot of these things I think are going to stick, and we'll be better for it, and our communities will be better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings you to the forefront. I mean, Jeff Watton and I were messing around with how to do remote podcasting, because there's so many Swain students here, and our goal is to at very least podcast every living visual performing and literary artist that has a connection to the city. And that's a daunting task. We didn't think that was going to be that big of a deal until we realized, oh my God, there's 65 artists just in one building. But it forced us to find another way of doing it. And Zooming, to tell you the truth, is really, I mean, sometimes technically we have issues. Like Jan and I, he had a connection that just kept going in and out, but we worked through it. And I think everybody knows it's not going to be completely polished, because it is what it is. and the content is more important than the performance, it seems. But it's moved us forward. And with that in mind, and we talked about this prior to this podcast, I would love to be able to interview as many of your musicians as possible. Right there, that's kind of a daunting task to begin with. How do you fit everybody in? Who's first? But something that we can discuss off the podcast, because people really want the information. I mean, Jay Peterman, who was a real person, not just a character on the Seinfeld show, not just Elaine's boss. He produced the Jay Peterman catalog. He had a manifesto inside the inside cover that a portion of it reads, "People want things that make their lives the way they wish they were." And I always was like stunned by that statement, because I think it is really true.
Yeah.
You know?
I think so. I think you're right. And so I agree with you that the whole digital aspect of this has opened up new avenues. And of course, human beings, we're adaptable, right? We're the most adaptable thing that the universe has ever seen. And so we're finding a way to make these things work, and we're finding a way to really bring about good things to come out of this. So I think a lot of that will stay with us, and really bring our lives to be more the way we want our lives to be. I also think, though, that as much as we can enjoy and take advantage of the digital online aspects of this, we're going to appreciate even more the in-person experiences that maybe up until now we've taken for granted a little bit. And so in a way, contrast, variety is the spice of life. And I think that applies to this case, that as much as we can enjoy and benefit from some of these online and digital experiences, when we finally get back to in-person experiences, we're going to appreciate those even more, I think. And especially when you think about what a symphonic orchestra experience is. 1,000 people sitting at the Zeiterion with 85 musicians and a conductor up on stage, playing their hearts out, this incredibly powerful, exciting music, and then you being able to clap and cheer and turn to the person next to you and say, "Oh my God, that was amazing." And so that experience, I think, if anything, is just going to be even stronger for us when we get back to it, because of the experiences we're having now with the digital and online things.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to wrap this up, because I know you have a call you have to make, or a meeting to get to. And I want to focus on the end of this, on you, because you talked about the orchestra, we talked about music, but what about Dave Prentiss? What about you?
Oh, so you wanted to save the most boring thing for last, huh? So yeah, what about me? I mean, I love what I do with the symphony. I love music. As I mentioned, I love all types of music. I'm just very passionate about music. I love rock and roll. I love the blues. I love jazz, the American songbook. I love opera and bluegrass, folk. Keep it going. And so I just want classical. I want to help classical music have its place at the table, at the music table, in our community. And so that is just a really great privilege for me to be able to do that, to work with an incredibly talented staff and board, with Yaniv, with our musicians. I mean, they're just all so talented and creative and passionate about what they do. And they love doing it in New Bedford, and they love doing it in the South Coast, as I do. We live in such a wonderful place. We should never take that for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just, I think, energizes us to do all the incredible things that I think the symphony does, and other organizations and artists in this area do too. I mean, it's just amazing what we have to enjoy all around us.
And I usually ask this of the artists on the program. It's a reflective question. The last question: How would you like to be remembered, Dave?
Interesting. Haven't thought about that. I guess, first of all, no bad thoughts, no bad memories. That would be my first choice. forget all of those. I would ask everybody to forget anything bad about me. And then second of all, I guess, certainly with respect to the symphony and the other projects in the community that I've been involved with, I just hope people say, yeah, he helped, he was a net plus, not a net negative. And that maybe in some way, I've contributed to the efforts to just make our community the great place that it is.
So I think we can agree that you're going to leave some big shoes to fill.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah, time will tell.
Yeah,
time will tell.
I mean, I really don't look at it that way. I mean, the way I look at it is, my job is to, when I, obviously move on or leave or whatever, which I have no intention of doing anytime soon. But when that happens, my goal is just to leave a really strong organization that won't skip a beat. That's really the goal, and I have no doubt that that's exactly what's going to happen, because we have, through our strategic planning, through the great staff and the board that we have, we always have an eye to the future, and we realize that what we're building has to be carried on by others, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure they can do that.
Thank you very much, Dave. And then one final thing, as I tell a lot of our guests, many of our guests, this is not a one and done. You have more pages that we have to go through in your history book to put into our history book, and we would love to have you back again. If you have any exciting news or news that we have enough lead time that we can work this in, please let us know. It would be fantastic. And we do the Artist Index. Our official name is the Artist Index website project. We are a collective digital archive, and someday, 20 years, 30 years, God knows how many years up the line, somebody's going to be listening to Dave Prentiss and go, that's why the symphony is the way it is today. And it's very important, because just reading about it, but now they heard you, they heard your personality, they felt the emotion in your voice, and that's really what's important about this.
Thanks, Ron, and just thank you and your team for doing what you're doing, because it really is important to capture what happens in this community, and it's been a real pleasure for me to talk to you, and I look forward to coming back some other time.
Excellent, thank you. And that wraps up another episode of the In Focus Artist Podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And this is Ron Fortier, your host, saying thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index Podcast. The South Coast Artist Index Podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.